For the latest film interviews, reviews, and everything making news in pop culture, subscribe to Film Companion now.
न खुले आँख अगर ख्वाब है तो ख्वाब सही न खुले आँख अगर ख्वाब है तो ख्वाब सही ये मुलाकात.
Ali Sethi, welcome to Film Companion. To begin with, I want to thank you for your music. I want to thank you for your delightful Instagram lives that have sustained so many of us.
गुलों में रंग भरे बादलों बहार चले.
Honestly, there's a part of me that just wants to say, यार बातें छोड़ते हैं, आप गाना गा दो बस. But I have so many questions for you. To begin with, Ali, what fascinates me is that music is only one of the things that you do, and I want to read this out so I don't miss anything. You're a Harvard graduate. At 24, you published your first book, The Wishmaker, which the New York Times described as a first-rate novel. You are, of course, also an author who's been published in the New Yorker magazine. You are currently working on a documentary, and you are Meera Nair's music teacher.
Oh my God,
But
that is true. That is true. I am her music teacher.
so, is there anything that Ali City can't do?
Apparently, I can't heal the rift between India and Pakistan. Apparently, I can't visit India. Apparently, I can't convince my countrymen and women and folks in the diaspora and elsewhere that peace and love is the best way. Which is why I'm in music in the first place, is because I feel that when I was a child growing up in a country that was um, you know, that had so much sort of ideology at work everywhere. And a lot of the time it was a kind of exclusionary ideology that I would encounter, in school or in the local mosque or on TV or whatever, this idea that we were this monolithic state defined along religious lines against this much bigger enemy country next door that was always conspiring to undo us and that kind of stuff that now one, alas, hears all over South Asia. Um, and music for me was a way out of that whole, shall we say, terrorized mindset. It was a way of connecting and of finding commonality and of finding love as a thread, as a common thread between people from across different categories of walks of life. So that is why I became a musician, is because I really approached it in the way that a scholar or a devotee sort of does a sannyas or does a kind of. It was for me a way of exiting what was given to me, which was this very polarized world, and a way of going into the wilderness, as in so much of Hindu and Bhakti and Sufi mythology, to find the light. So I'm still searching because, in answer to your question, I feel like, as Faiz Ahmed Faiz says, that dawn has still not come. So here we are. Here we are. There's much that I can't do, and it keeps me going because I feel like there's a lot to be done.
You know, but well, I'll come to it later. How I think that you are really sort of a connector and a bridge in so many ways. But let's talk about the music first.
Sure.
You are called the sort of the king, the modern king of the ghazal.
Oh
Uh,
my God.
you reintroduced the form, Ali, to a generation that was not acquainted with it. You've helped us, the original fans, to rediscover it again. Tell me, what do you love about the ghazal? What does it allow you to do as an artist?
I love many things about it. I think one is that it's such a cosmopolitan form. The ghazal it originated apparently in Arabia in around the 8th century, where it was a kind of, shall we say, kind of the sort of uh, appetizer before the main course, right? And of course, the main course that the poet would recite in the public square or in the bazaar or before a sort of audience of local elites was always the qasida or the paean to the tribal chief, wordy, lofty, insincere, not really fun. But that's where the patronage came from, right? Was by pleasing the powerful. But to draw people to you in the first place, to get their attention, you would recite these couplets, these rhyming couplets with deliberately veiled, ambiguous, undisclosed entities as the protagonists. So who is the ashik? Who is the mehboob? Who is the lover? Who is the beloved? This was deliberately left to the imagination, in order to be titillating, in order to be potentially subversive. It could be a person, it could be a human god, it could be country, it could be two tribes that are warring with each other. So the I and thou of the ghazal is a really radical, open-ended space. And of course, over the centuries, as it went from Persia into India, and then into India and Pakistan post-partition, so many poets have used the ghazal, especially Faiz Ahmed Faiz, who I'm a huge fan of, to kind of make these subtle but very powerful critiques, of orthodoxy, of whatever seems to be the mullah approved or pandit approved, NOC endorsed sort of, narrative. The ghazal will sort of do these little jafas and these little subtle silky cuts kind of undermine that thing and reveal actually a multiplicity underneath, a multiplicity of causes and effects underneath. So poetically, that's so much of what excited me, because when I would listen to a ghazal like Sham-e Firaq, Apna Pooj, Faiz Ahmed Faiz, which my mother subjected us to constantly when we were children, um, I remember thinking, like always thinking, I had this kind of overactive literary mind, obsessing over the words. Like, what is the Shami Firaq? Is it this person who can't be with the person that they want to be with, which is so many people? Or is it the partition, like Firaq, the eve of parting, the eve when we were separated? Ai or aake tal gayi. And then it turns out that it's about Faiz being in jail, away from his family and his spouse. But then the other thing that I loved about it so much when I would listen to someone like Farida Khanum or someone like Mehdi Hassan, is the musicality of it is also very interesting, because the art of bol banana, which originally was a kind of khayal tumri space, or prerogative. When it's in the ghazal, it becomes more exciting, because you'll take the sort of the key phrase of the ghazal. So right, you'll say, there's a share like in Shami Firaq, you'll say, दिल से तो हर मामला करके चले थे साफ हम, कहने में उनके सामने बात बदल बदल गई. So before you arrive at badal badal gayi, which stacks up with the rhyme, right, which is tal gayi, dhal gayi, badal gayi, which is where the climax occurs, or the little death occurs, where everybody says Wah! And starts nodding their head, and the tabla also meets you over there. Usse pehle you have to edge, and you have to create this, like, before we get to the destination, let's have foreplay, right? Which is, the ghazal is about foreplay. I think that's what I'm trying to get at. So musically also, with alaps and little bowls, like I sang, the great ghazal of Faiz is Gulo mein rang bhare baade no bahar chale. Can I give you just a little demo? I have my beloved keyboard here. So much of the challenge of singing it was, finding new ways of improvising on these words. Bol banana, how to embellish and embroider the words to give them newer meaning in ways that Mehdi Saab has not already done, because of course he's covered all the ground. So there's this lovely share in there, Kafas udas hai yaro, sabah se kuch to kaho, right? So it's about the sadness of the imprisoned, which is all of us today in so many ways, whether it's COVID or censorship or fascism, or depending on where you are in the world. So قفس उदास है यारो सबा से कुछ तो कहो قفس उदास है. Right, so now before I get to the conclusion of it, I have a space here. A space opens up. قفس उदास है قفس उदास है قفس उदास कफ़स उदास है, कफ़स उदास, 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 कफ़स उदास. And I go and find it again over there. I just made this up, this little thing I've done here because, you know. So I think this is the other thing that I really love about the ghazal is that it allows me to improvise a musical identity. It allows me to improvise a political identity. It allows me to improvise a personal identity. And I think for me, as someone who's so sort of feels so shackled and confined in present day South Asia, even as a kind of now I live between New York City and Lahore, even as a kind of diasporic being, I find that the ghazal allows me to kind of go into spaces that are otherwise not possible in my material physical life.
Tell me, Ali, what is your process of creation? You of course said that the Instagram lives are a sort of riyaz almost.
Right.
तेरी महफिल में लेकिन हम ना होंगे मोहब्बत करने वाले कम ना होंगे
How do you choose that this is the song that I want to do, and the music arrangement? How does that work?
When I'm making a song, you mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes the melody will come to me first because I've spent so many years just obsessing over rags and their provenance and where this Rajasthani marn comes from and where this particular Thurpat style chant comes from and where this Middle Eastern import raga sort of how it gets processed into a desi expression. So much of my, even when I'm asleep in the middle of the night, like rags are resolving themselves in my mind. I wake up in the morning half slept but like with a solution. And I think that is something that really sort of is sometimes the key motivator or the thing that generates the tune. So I'll come up with a tune and then I'll look for words, and then I'll go to rekhta.org and be like, acha ji, like where is what fits the beher, what fits the but more and more now I think it's also that I will the theme or the idea, the motif will come first, the lyrical aspect will come first, sometimes the visual will come first, and then it's like, well, what's a good way to do this? Nowadays I'm collaborating with musicians who are not South Asian, but who I admire very much, like Nicholas Jar, who's a wonderful electronic musician that I've loved for many years, and we just made a track together, using two of Faiz's poems. And you know there I was responding to or anticipating a kind of music that is not in a South Asian melodic space at all.
Right.
So I felt suddenly very free to kind of you know tap into other parts of me, like the English parts of me, or the non-classical parts of me. So it's like it'll come from anywhere, the idea. Yeah.
Tell me, Ali, how hard is it to be a fiercely political artist like you are, and to have a thriving career? Because this is something that artists here struggle with. And one of the things always said about Bollywood is that nobody says anything.
Right.
Does the fact that you live in New York or between New York and Lahore give you more freedom?
Absolutely. There is no question about it. Being away gives me more freedom. I mean, I'll just give you an example. I was thinking about something the other day. There's a beautiful poem of Fez's. दिल में अब यूं तेरे भूले हुए गम आते हैं, दिल में अब यूं तेरे भूले हुए गम आते हैं, जैसे बिछड़े हुए काबे में सनम आते हैं. Right? And so Kabe mein aana, and then many people have sung it. And I was just making a tune over it the other day, and it occurred to me because I'm so accustomed to a certain kind of censorship within my native country, that the Kaaba and the idea then of Mecca and whatever. And I was like, well, somebody could, I don't know, distort this intention and be like, why are you singing something with the Kaaba mentioned in it or whatever? Of course, 50 years ago, this would not have been an issue because there are so many ghazals and nazms that include the Kaaba. But now, because of this atmosphere of sort of religiously motivated or religiously branded violence in my native Pakistan, so many people have to think three times before they kind of. I also know that that is absolutely true now of India. I mean, like, and certainly I, as somebody who I'm Muslim. I grew up Muslim with so much Muslim tradition, including musical tradition, but so much of it was mixed up with what is Hindu tradition, right? So like you sing a Tungri, and inevitably it features, Krishan Maharaj, and here you are talking about, Saval Mor Mohara, and about, Krishna Mora Savala Salona, Kaise Byam Radhe. I now like have actually an Indian friend of mine in New York said to me, he was like, well, on your Instagram lives, I've seen you talking about Krishna and Shiva with love and devotion and admiration and kind of, that affection that we have with the common culture that we grew up with. But if I were you, now that so many Indians watch you, I would not go there. So I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, we have our own version of this blasphemy culture now. It's like a kind of, like either side being like, like you show me one peck, I'll show you one. It's that kind of mirroring of fear. And I think in that kind of atmosphere, at some point you just have to say, I'm lucky I'm not like right now happen to be in those physical spaces. I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I'm not there right now and just do what I love to do and what I know is the truth, which is that, our hybrids are better than our purest sort of, angry versions of ourselves.
Absolutely. I couldn't
Yeah.
agree more. Absolutely. But Ali, do you find yourself censoring yourself?
I mean, probably, yeah. I find myself, like I said, thinking now, because I think I'm, even on my Instagram lives, I'm aware that like the audience is, the internet is a very freeing space because you get to, there's no pabandi on who can join you from where, broadly speaking. But it's also this very radical exposure, Suddenly you can be like a few days ago, Malala Yousafzai, whose work I admire so much, she was caused I mean, just by saying something in her British Vogue interview, said something like, you know, uh, I, I think she was saying something, speculating about like partnership, as like a kind of, maybe as a term, as an alternative to the term marriage or whatever. But anyway, her words were of course taken out of context, and a lot of people went crazy in Pakistan, saying, why is she like, whose agenda is she? I just woke up in the morning and saw this, and I just posted a little story saying, please, if you're frothing at the mouth, like wait till you hear like my views on so many of these things. You're not going to like it, and please leave my page if you're because genuinely I was like, if this is what triggers you, somebody's completely abstract speculations about their personal views on things, please don't come here, because you're going to get offended by the things that I'm going to propose and talk about and project. And of course then I got like I got trolled a little bit, but I wore it as a kind of badge of pride. I was like, acha, this is good. This now I know that I'm alive and well, is because like, now it's not just meaty baate. My father said this to me once, who's been a very political person his whole life. He said to me once, he said, "ये तुम्हें दिल नहीं करता कि कभी तुम agitate करो इनको?" And I was like, of course मेरा दिल करता है मैं agitate करूं, and I do. I just don't do it in the way that you do. So yeah.
Ali, what I think is so exciting is that you are now a sort of a conduit, right, between musical traditions and poets who are, centuries old, and a sort of contemporary digital world. You're doing Rag Yaman appreciation
Right.
Instagram lives, right? That's amazing to me.
I can't help myself.
No, but it's
What else is there to appreciate? What are we making these days? Please, can you give me like a, Ghana from like the last 2 years that I can be like, ye dekho.
correct. But you're also Ali, a bridge between borders. And like you said, that so many of your fans come from India. Tell me, do you feel this very keenly? Do you have a very keen sense that what you say, what you do, can connect people, can convert people to maybe a more kind of inclusive way of thinking?
Sure, and I think thank you for asking that question. Absolutely, I think it has the power to do that. And also, I, people will ask me sometimes, I mean, my own relatives will sometimes, my aunts and uncles will say things like, in that Punjabi kind of way, they'll be, कि इन्ना पढ़ लिख के यही करना सी, it's that kind of, कि अभी तक यही कर, चलो अब हो गया, as though I have now expended all of my infantile sort of longings, and I have now puri parwane ki tarah bujhod at the feet of one shama, and now I should just like accept that I am, what my caste reality is, and just say okay and just go into my father's profession and just be done with it all. That's the
Correct.
kind of that's the kind of subtext of so much of it. But I always respond by saying, look, I I remember having this aha moment, to borrow an Oprahism, at when I was in undergrad at Harvard, and I was taking a course taught by Amartya Sen and Sugato Bose on contemporary South Asia, and it was a sweeping survey of like currents in South Asian history. So from Ashoka through Akbar to including Kabir and Mirabai, etc., through the progressive writers movement all the way, and there was a lot of this mingling of politics, philosophy, literature, and the kind of ways in which they have done an interface. And I remember, because my father has been an intellectual and a sort of media person all my life, um, and I always grew up with this kind of in Pakistan, this what was a bad word and still is a bad word in Pakistan, secularist. Yes, secularist hai, the suspicion that sort of engulfs you if you are rumored to be a secularist.
Right.
And of course, my mother's friends, who were also activists, etc., were all part of this sort of apparently secularist milieu. I always think secular is a wonderful thing, and today we need it more than ever in both India and Pakistan. Um, and when I was taking this course, I remember my TA, my teaching assistant, saying to me, the problem is that secular intellectuals do not have constituencies in
Mm.
South Asia. They do not have constituencies. They may have audiences, but they don't have constituencies. And
Right.
I just intuitively said to her, I was like 19 years old, and I'm pretty proud of myself for taking this. I said, well, the Sufis and the Bhakts, though, while not outwardly secular or not committed to an anti-religious agenda, were secularizing in the work that they did, because they dissolved these binaries of difference. And so while they revealed the humane within the religious and the religious within the humane, and undid this language of that, basically de-weaponized discourse and
Mm.
ideology by talking in this language that was simultaneously potentially religious and secular and human, and then so much more, right? So much more. Like today, I live in New York City, where there's talk of degendering fashion. And I think to myself, like, as a South Asian, I should marshal this, and we have done in our video run, to show these alternative local pre-colonial also versions of love between boys and girls with each other, and like people who are non-binary, and beloveds that are not literal in that like particular, like ab inki shadi hone wali hai kind of way. We have
Right.
so much of this in South Asian culture,
Yeah.
and we can draw on it today to make these connections. So I I remember thinking that I feel like the antibodies to extremism, to any kind of extremist ideology, are already contained in so much of this, what we now call mind heart. Is it mind heart? I think it's called mind, what scholars call mind heart knowledge,
Mm.
right? Tasawwuf in the Sufi tradition, right? This idea that the music, philosophy, poetry combined, the devotional, right, is an alternative religion, alternative ideology, alternative, and it has always been a place where away from their ideological identities, South Asians have always taken shelter, have always found refuge, and have always found ways to connect. So for me, it was very much a kind of political and intellectual project. This, and of course, it had to do with love. I didn't go into my classes on being like, ab mujhe ye seekhna hai. I loved it. I already had it within me, and I just thought, this is not mere, um, you know, uh, dalliance or dabbling or entertainment, or this is the way that Kabir thought of it, or the way that Bulle Shah thought of it. This is the tool that we need to kind of undo so much of the violence that surrounds us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Ali, this is a question that comes from my colleague Pratyush, who is a big admirer. Why is Rag Yaman so popular in Bollywood songs? Every Sanjay Leela Bhansali film has some version of it. Do you have an explanation?
So I actually am just composing. I've just written a song in Rag Yaman, which I think is actually, the rags have kind of, I mean, except for the excellent Sanjay Leela Bansali, I think, and Vishal Bhardwaj, who I can think of, was another composer who really relies on rag music for the scores and for the movies. I don't really find rag music in mainstream Bollywood stuff anymore.
Yeah.
And I wonder why that is. I've talked to a few singer composer friends who work in Bombay, and they've said to me, "Arey yaar, kya pooch rahe ho?" And I'll be like, "No, tell me, like, why are we not seeing more of this?" And they say, "Look, remix ka zamana hai.
Correct.
It's people don't even want to pay composers anymore. They
Yeah.
just feel like, um, the easiest, quickest, most expedient way to a hit tune is to recycle something from the 90s to kind of repackage this sasta nostalgia and just feed it to people because that's what they want. But I think what that does is it leads to. I was just listening to. I was stuck in a on the Manhattan Bridge the other day in my Uber, unable to move. I was going to Amitav Ghosh's house for a dinner. He's my dear friend, and I was just thinking, like I'm gonna just check out the latest Bollywood hits on Spotify. I
Hmm.
want to hear because I haven't listened to you know recent stuff, and I want to see what's going on. Like, what are the beats? What are the chords? What are the ways of singing? And I heard it. I heard like two or three playlists because that bridge was jammed for like 45 minutes, and I felt like there was almost no I could make no distinction between one song and the other. Like where one ended, the other began. It was like, you
Possible.
know, all these otherwise very versatile singers, all these otherwise very versatile music directors, composers, they seemed to me in that moment, and this may be a distorted representation, I can't speak for everybody, but in that kind of distilled version of it that summarized this is Bollywood today, everything sounded so uniform.
Right.
And so I thought to myself, like if you think back to the music even that I grew up with, like there was one fast song, one slow song, one bhajan type devotional song, one kawali type ishka ishka type song, one item number. I mean, item number was a treat. It was its own
Correct.
fiendish, freaky occurrence, you
Yeah.
know. Now the item number has become the main dish,
Yeah.
right? And so like the item number has also lost its personality. It's lost its, I mean, like if you listen to R.D. Burman and his great item numbers, inevitably starring the great Helen, you
Yeah.
know like from Aa Jaane Jaan, which I think is one of the just the
Finest.
best, finest, exquisite. Just the musicality of it, to begin with these roars and these screams, and then that trembling sort of mandolin comes in, and then then there's a kind of diversion. Then there's some kind of and then some rising kind of creature. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, and then Helen batting her eyelashes and waking up, and then Lataji with her, like, I mean, the mahal, the atmosphere, the kind of the adventure of it is gone.
Yeah.
So and by the way, this is inevitably, I'll get some comments being like, अरे अपने पाकिस्तान में तो देखो तुम लोग तो म्यूजिक इट्स लाइक भाई पाकिस्तान की कौन बात कर रहा है हम भी तो रीमिक्स बना रहे हैं I mean I do Coke Studio in Pakistan which
Right.
has been for many years a kind of you know in the name of folk music, I feel like we have at Coke Studio done perhaps too many renditions, and I am guilty of this as well myself. But now we are all trying to move into a sort of original space in Pakistan, which is very exciting. I think the most exciting music in Pakistan today is by younger artists who are just doing their own hybrid, totally improvised thing, and in the indie scene in India as well.
You know what I love, Ali, is that of course there is all the artistry, there is the intellectual heft. I think in an interview maybe you described Coke Studio as giving Pakistan civilizational coherence, which I was like,
Right.
oh my God.
That may have been a little like I may have gone too far, but
But it sounded fab, okay? But at the same time, in an interview, you're like really preening about the fact that you have a personal shopper at Barney's.
oh my
Okay.
God.
I love the mix of that. Do you not take yourself too seriously?
Do I not take myself too seriously?
Yeah.
I think I'm just in the habit of like talking in a way that makes me appear like I take myself too seriously, but I don't take myself too seriously.
You don't. No, you
No, I
don't.
don't.
Yeah. Which
I
is
don't take myself too seriously. In fact, my real, I think my agenda is to is to is to de-seriousify A lot of what is thought of as like, oh, serious, oh, like, ooh, like, this is the realm of our ancestors. Like this woman said to me, this American woman who's very smart, otherwise said to me once, she was like, we were sitting in this place and there was another musician sitting there who only sings in English, and she was like, what you do is about the future, to the other guy, and to me she was like, and what you do is about the past. And I was like, what? And I was like, hold on, hon. Like, the past is the future. Like, I mean, look at our present. It's so horrible. We have to, like, say that the past and whatever, to draw on it on something that is an alternative in order to say that the future can be imagined differently. Because if we just take at face value what these politicians are giving us in the here and now, we're all going to be beep, like it will end badly for all of us, you know so I do, part of the reason that I do some of this like antic manic comedy in all of my stuff is that I want people to feel, as we say in Lahore, easy ho jaye aap easy ho jaye, easy ho jaye, stress mein na aaye. Even when you're listening to, yeah, easy ho jaye, please. As is my advice to all Indians and Pakistanis who are listening to this, please easy ho jaye. Khudara, please easy ho jaye. For the sake of love and language, easy ho jaye. Because God knows it's too hard. It's too hard right now. I mean, I got to say to you, like 5 years ago, I had this wonderful visa that let me go pretty much all over India, except for Kashmir, which I long to see. I have such a romance about Srinagar that I feel like now it'll be eternal Shame Farag. But I used to, I went to Goa, I went to Bangalore, I went to Kolkata, I took the Shatabdi from Amritsar, just like a 30-minute drive from my home in Lahore. I got onto the train and went, having Golgappas and Chana Bhaturas, went from Amritsar, where Farida Khanum was born and where her home was. And, just the associations are so natural. It's such a natural journey for me to go from Lahore to Amritsar to Delhi and from Delhi to go onwards. And now it's not possible. Now it's not possible. And I'm just like, this is amazing. I feel like we're in a kind of, almost like a kind of, like World War II type situation, Europe situation, where as I said, this is what I mean. पहले से मरासिम न सही फिर भी कभी तो रस्मों राहे दुनिया ही निभाने के लिए आ, या आने दे, as we would say. So this is it. When I'm singing Ranjish Shi से ही दिल ही दुखाने के लिए, and people are like, हाँ, मुझे मेरे वो याद आ रहे हैं. I'm like, भाई आपको आपके वो याद आ रहे होंगे, पर ये भी तो अप्रिशिएट करें कि हम सब मिलके यहाँ ये सुन रहे हैं. एंड इट इज पॉसिबल. रंजिशों के जरिए ही पॉसिबल है ना, दुख दर्द की बातें करने के पॉसिबल कि हम सब इकट्ठे हो जाएं.
Correct.
तो क्यों ना हम बाकी जिंदगी में भी ये कोशिश करें. बाकी जिंदगी में तुम मुस्लिम, मैं हिंदू, तुम इंडियन, मैं पाकिस्तानी, तुम ये तुम, and then within that all of this. Anyway, this is it. This is why I'm in this. I'm in this because I feel like I'm also a kind of new age healer,
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Right?
Absolutely.
This will get me some grants in America, no? If I'm like I heal divisions between like people across difference.
But
They'll be
you
like,
do.
now you're talking.
What you do. Tell me, you mentioned Farida Khanum. How did you end up as her Shagird, and what is it like to sit at her feet and learn music?
It's really fascinating. I through Monsoon Wedding, this is such a journey. Farida Khanum lives like a walk away from where I live in Lahore. Like there's my family's home in Gulbarg, and then hers is, like you could actually walk to it in less than 10 minutes. I grew up listening to a lot of ghazal, etc., but never made the connection that, I thought this is somebody who's in the realm of the classics and whatever. And, when I saw Monsoon Wedding and the way in which Aaj Jaane Ki Zid Na Karo was used in it as a kind of ambient score to this very like this really racy scene where the bride is going off with her lover, and then these cops like it flash their flashlights at them in the car, and such a familiar kind of fraught, sexy moment in Desi life, no, that it's like you can do something fun, but pakde na jana, like that kind of thing. And the idea that this like semi-classical song is the soundtrack to this thing for me was very radical because it brought these otherwise irreconcilable genres or spaces together. Gritty, cinema verite, sort of a kind of global perspective on South Asian life, edgy cinematic moment with this tabla harmonium ghazal that has been, extra reverb ke saath. It's sounding like this languid love consciousness that's happening in the. So I saw it and I immediately was like, this is this is a resource. This is something that I want to need. At 17 years old, I remember, and I said to my mother, I said, "Do you know Farida Khanum?" And she said, "Do I know Farida Khanum? Of course, I've interviewed her many times for the paper, and I know her. तुम्हें बड़ा प्यार करेंगी, बताओ तुमने मिलना है उनको." I said, "मुझे मिला दे उनके साथ." So I went to see her, and we were having chai, and she very sweetly she said, my mother said, "जी गाने का शौक है." तो she said, "अच्छा अच्छा सुनाओ 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 ये भी पैटी खाओ समोसा खाओ सुनाओ सुनाओ." So I think I sang a Rafi Saab song. I sang Chaudhry Ka Chand Ho or something like that in my, at that time, pretty rustic, but no less confident um, uh, version of it. I sang it to her, and she said, that hasmukh expression that she always has. She said, आवाज बहुत अच्छी है यार आपकी, बस इस तरह ही light गाते रहना, इसी तरह गाने light गाते रहना. So then I went off to college, and in the summer when I came back, I went to see her, and I said, no, after having this aha moment that I told you about, I went to see her again. I had my mother ring her up, and she said, हाँ अच्छा है बच्चे वापस आए, आ जाओ चाय पीने के लिए. So I went to see her, and I think I there, like, really earnestly in my undergraduate way, I said to her, I said, मुझे ये सीखना है, मुझे ये समझना है कि ये इल्म, ये फन जो आपके पास है, ये क्या है, ये कला जो है इसको. And so from being very sort of, blase, samosa khao, happy, she suddenly gave me this, like, sidelong, deadly look. And she was like, beta, ye kaam jo hai na, ye आसान नहीं है सीखना. इसको समझना भी जो है ना, ये वो लोग चले गए हैं जिन्होंने सिखाना था, जिन्होंने सीखना था. अब आप इसकी तरफ आओगे तो फिर तवज्जो के साथ आना पड़ेगा. You have to be attentive and you have to give it your all. Otherwise you can't really. And given who you are and where you are in life, I would say आप इस तरफ ना आओ, because you have other things to do. And also I think the subtext was, you're too old to, like, to really, like, do this. I mean, you're 18 years old. That's She said, I was 4 when they made me sit down and start to do this stuff. But I persisted, and I kept going back to her. She then found me an ustad called Moin Rafi, who had called himself Moin Rafi because he was a spiritual shagird of Rafi Saab from the walled city of Lahore, who would come over the harmonium and teach me the scales. And I think I was a quick learner. So because I'd listened to so much of it, and I'd in my own time projected my voice so much to so much of this, I could do the renditions even if they were rusty. I had a grasp of the movements and of the kind of grammar of it, of like how it's moving, which is what I was most interested in. And it's a critique that's very valid, I think, of a lot of what I have done in the past, which is that it's so fixated on form. It's kind of obsessed with form and with the shape and with the kind of the outlines of it, and that the feeling and the soul and the sincerity perhaps is lacking in some of it. It's kind of architectural for me, as
Right.
opposed to sort of sentimental for me. So I think she saw that also at some point, and then because I persisted so much, she said, "Isko ab aapko ustad dhoondna hai." So then I apprenticed myself formally to Ustad Nasiruddin Sami of Delhi Karana, who's a wonderful repository of just also the stories of where this stuff comes from, which for the intellectual aspect of it was so engaging for me. The idea that some rags come to us from Vedic culture, some rags come to us from, sort of folk culture, some rags come to us from the forest, some rags come to us from migrants who came from Persia and Armenia, some, and that that not everything needs to be put into one scheme in order for it to make sense. He's also, Ustad Sami is a great expert of microtones. So the notes that exist between these notes, like these sharp and flat divisions are a Western construct that is only, that is quite recent, and that Indic, Arab, Persian microtonal culture is actually much more ancient and much more fine. Like when you sing Rag Darbari, we talk about Andolan Sur, which is like a note that is unstable, that julos. And like I once explained this to a Western musician, and he was like, "Show me, I need you to show me." And I was like, "Okay, I'll show you, baby." And then I like did this whole thing, and he was like, mind blown. And I was like, इतना कुछ है mind blow करने के लिए कि बस शुरू मत करवाओ. But so with Nasiruddin Sami Saab, I did this apprenticeship for about, you know, 6 to 7 years, just doing the motions and kind of just doing my riyaz on the. And then I went back to her about 4 years ago, um, and I think having done that groundwork, that homework, I was in a better position to, because she's like the way she is a singer, she's imperious and she's impetuous. She
Right.
will kind of grab you 1 minute and really kind of take you to cloud nine and the seventh heavens, and then she'll just like abandon you. इट्स अ पार्ट ऑफ हर अदा, यू नो, कि ये करके एक हसीन थाम के आपको, और फिर आपको छोड़ दिया और फिर
Right.
कहीं और निकल गए, यू नो, और फिर अपना घूम घूम के फिर आपको एक बहुत टेंडर हाय मर जाएंगे करके आपको पकड़ लिया, थाम लिया, और फिर एक आलाप पे निकल गए, एक छुट्टी ले ली. तो शी इज दिस काइंड ऑफ डिलाइटफुल truant as a singer, you know, like she'll play with you and with your feelings, and that's a part of the flirtatious quality of her singing. So she's like that as a teacher also. I mean, which is that in the beginning she was very kind of, she would say, बहुत अच्छा गाया है, बहुत अच्छा है, फिर तो कहो a passage, and I would begin, and then she would say, हाँ चलो TV on करो, and like put it on, and you know, like I would just be sitting there thinking like, what? I just like, you know, and then she would say, हाँ आजकल सुरीले बच्चे कहाँ गा रहे हैं, लेकिन सुरीले जो गा रहे हैं वो कहाँ हैं, and then look at me in this way. And then she would say, बहुत अच्छा गा रहे हो, बहुत अच्छा. And then immediately, like I would like be panting after, like trying for her approval again in this way. But I have a, you know, my this poor iPhone, which I refuse to give up, has like about at least 300 hours of our riyaz together, or over just like 2 or 3 rags that we worked on in these last 4 years. And those hours have been for me really incredible in retrospect, because when I was doing it, you know, we would spend 3 to 4 hours together every day, and with while also eating food and talking, etc., which is the Riyaz Mahal, which is how Riyaz is done, you know.
Right.
Um, but what she has really, I think, imparted to me in particular, has been this kind of, I can only describe it as an algorithm. It's the algorithm of melody, of dhun, the way a dhun generates itself and then keeps generating. You know, it's the logic of an alap. I mean, an alap is not, they see alap is not notated like Western music, where you're sitting there with your anagon or the sheet thing and you're like, okay, from B to E to F we will go. It's like we know the sat sura of a raga, but वो आपके मूड पे है. If it's raining lightly, or if you've met a nasty person before your recital, or if you're remembering somebody who has passed, who is not with you anymore, depending on where you are in your emotional life, you can begin a rag in any way
Yeah.
while being within the rules. I think that paradox has always been so fascinating to me, that it's rule bound, that there is a kanun to the rag. You can't exit those 7 notes, sometimes even just 5 notes, right? But you can roam freely within that space for 2 hours. And I think that is something that I was after. You know, that is what I wanted to understand, was how do you, what is this logic that generates itself, which is an algorithm, which is the logic of improvisation. It's the science of khayal. It's the science of bol banana. It's the science of Drupad Alap, you know, of the Rom Tom. How do we keep? And I think that is something that she has really, because she's a disciple, of course, of Bade Ghulam Ali Khan Sahib. She's a disciple of, she actually sat and studied with him when she was a child. And so the best of the artisans of Desi music have imparted this thing to her, which I am not nowhere near, but like I've got a bit of it. Like I feel like that lady, that connection with that methodology is something that she has established for me.
And now you are imparting it to Meera.
Oh my God. That's one of the things that we do. Yes, we do Zoom Riyaz. She's in Kampala now and I'm here. And I mean, she also teaches me so many things, you know. I'm so keen on expanding my visual sort of, you know, because everything is now audio visual, you know, increasingly. And I also kind of, she doesn't know it, I think, but like maybe she does know it, but like I also like feast on her expertise when it comes to, you know, telling stories visually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a reciprocal riyaz that we do. Yeah.
Ali, tell me finally, if there was one thing
Hmm.
that you want people to take away from your music, what is it?
It's that love conquers all. It's that love in all its hues conquers all. And that as South Asians, we know this intuitively. And so it is ironic, tragic, romantic, farcical in the present age to find us so blocked and so unable to access those sensibilities, whether it has to do with our, the way we are as nations with one another, whether it has to do with the way we define citizenship in these narrow ways now, whether it has to do with, laws prohibiting people from having a pride march, you know, whether it has to do with laws. I mean, laws kya? I mean, like the Aurat March recently in Pakistan, where women are just talking about, like their issues, what they wanna say, what they want to do, what they critique, what they will accept, what they will not accept, and the kind of online backlash. This idea that like women expressing themselves in public is a conspiracy against the nation, against our identity or whatever. And like, I mean, every single Qawwali is written by a man who's writing as a woman who is out there breaking the laws of patriarchy, who's saying, Aaj rang hai, Reema, I have to go, Kanjri baniya meri izzat na ghatdi, mainu nach ke yaar manavan de, just, I mean, it's such a subversive sensibility that we are heirs to. And yet we are now in a kind of, I feel, this is why I resent someone saying to me, you represent the past, whereas somebody else represents the future. I feel like, no, our present is so toxic and so narrow that we have to turn to alternatives. We have to find alternatives within tradition and then connect them with contemporary global perspectives and sensibilities that are truly emancipated and liberated. And this is as true, I think, of diaspora, of Desi diaspora, as it is of those of us who reside in present day South Asia. I think we have to find connections. We have to find connections. We are better than this. I really refuse to accept the regime of refusal. This mahal of tarke talukat and of like ki chup raho and khamosh raho. I feel like we have to find the language, and I think that's what I'm trying to do, is to find those links.
Well, Ali, keep doing what you're doing, and hopefully someday we will get there.
Inshallah, as we say. Thank you so much for this. I'm so excited to be talking to you. It's like sometimes when I can't go to sleep at night, which is when I watch my favorite stuff, that I go and watch your roundtable interviews and things, and I'm like in the mahal of the little adda that you create with some of my favorite people, and I'm so happy to have been a part of one with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you so much.
न खुले आँख अगर ख्वाब है तो ख्वाब सही न खुले आँख अगर ख्वाब है तो ख्वाब सही ये मुलाकात बड़े देर के बाद आई है ये मुलाकात बड़े देर के बाद आई है लब पे एक बात बड़े देर के बाद आई चांदनिया
Hi, I'm Ali Sethi. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to Film Compare.